So good morning, thanks everyone, and for the folks that were in the room yesterday, there'll be a little bit of duplicate content, and I hope the mic will work better, or I as a speaker will hopefully perform better. So first, the last couple of days have been really interesting for me because HubSpot, we're very much about our culture, and I'll go through that today. And I'll also go through how we use a lot of the Atlassian tools to really nourish that culture. But honestly, the last couple of days, I've heard enough really cool stories from other people. I was pretty humbled, and I'm like, I have more work to do. I have to get back to the office and kind of beat the drum on culture a little bit more. So introduce myself, I'm the CIO. Basically means I'm the handyman or the guy that fixes things. Because one of our principles at HubSpot is to move very fast and break things. So as the guy in IT, I kind of have to be on the reactionary side. So a little bit of background on HubSpot. We're a late-stage startup, and I think we're actually using the term scale-up nowadays because we're approaching about 700 employees, and that's a pretty big startup, right? And a little bit different or contrasting to Atlassian, who went a long, long time without doing fundraising. We kind of had the mental state from day one of go big or go home. And so we really kind of leaned into the venture capital community and raised a bunch of money. Now, from a company standpoint, we are headquarters in Cambridge, Massachusetts, right outside of MIT. I'll be honest, I suspect the crowd here today is a little bit more West Coast than East Coast, and we have a little bit of envy on the East Coast. We feel like all the great tech companies have come to the West Coast. So it's kind of like the rapper East Coast, West Coast thing, so we're trying our best to build this really hip culture out there. And then most recently, we opened an office in Dublin, Ireland. I'm Irish, as many Boston people are. So we call them Dub Spotters instead of HubSpotters, and we've got about 50 people over there today. But really, what does HubSpot actually do? So I told you a little bit about the company size. We are actually on a mission to change how the world does marketing. And this is an actual URL. You can hit HubSpotcom. What is HubSpot? Because a lot of people don't really understand it. And we basically think that marketing and sales has been broken for quite a long time, maybe even decades. What we're really trying to do is change all the tactics that people have used in marketing from what we call outbound, which is very interruption-based, to inbound. And we're doing that through tools like social media, blogging, personalized website content, and all those kind of things. And it's not just a software product we're building. It's a very, very ambitious product. Lots of people like to use the analogy of, I want to be the Salesforce.com of something, because Salesforce.com has left such a dent in the SaaS CRM world. So humbly, we would say we would like to be the Salesforce.com of marketing and sales enablement tools. And if you look at all the things on this slide, all those are different parts of our SaaS platform. It's blogging, it's social media, it's marketing analytics, it's website hosting, it's email marketing. So there's about 20 different products. It's pretty ambitious. And we've been super fortunate with that. How I'd like to also explain inbound marketing is it's the opposite of outbound. And I think all you folks know what outbound is: advertisements, spam, email, cold calling, direct mail. And I love to go through stats. 86% of us basically skip commercials today. We all record it. We all watch it online. 91% of us pretty much mark as spam or unsubscribe for unsolicited emails. So you guys probably all wake up every morning, or girls wake up every morning, you look at your phone, and you're just kind of inundated with emails. Direct mail just goes to the recycle bin. Hopefully everyone's earth-friendly and we at least recycle it. And then 200 million people are on a do not call list. And there's only 300 million people in America. I didn't even realize there was 200 million phone numbers, but that's how big the do not call list is. So back to HubSpot, we're on this mission to basically take all these tactics that we think are broken and fundamentally flip them on their head and change the world of marketing. We've been super fortunate. We hit 10,000 customers this week while I was here, so I was really, really psyched with that. I mentioned we raised a bunch of venture capital, so fortunately the revenue matches the customer growth. And from a company size, we sell to every type of company: SMBs, enterprises, and we're really just trying to make them better companies, which is super rewarding for us. But above and beyond all that, and these are nice stats and yada, 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 they're a little self-serving. Honestly, to us, we wanted to build a once-in-a-generation company. We actually wanted to build a company, and I think the Atlassian folks mentioned this on stage as well during the fireside chat, that would be around long after we were. This is a little bit self-serving and self-deprecating. We all say that we want to be carried out in a body bag of this company. We are so committed to building this company that people are excited to work about. Now, as it relates to that, that would be to create this culture. And a lot of people, and I think this week there's been a lot of discussion around, you can't create a culture, you can't force a culture, culture happens. And we agree with that to a degree, but we sure believe that it needs to be nourished, and it needs to be motivated, and you need to listen to what your employees are doing and act upon those. those really beliefs and values. So a couple more things that I want to touch on is during this building of this company and building of this culture, which again is a little bit of an oxymoron if you can't create culture, what we looked at is how we all work has changed. Okay? And I think it's really cool if you look at all the Atlassian tools. I think they've enabled much of this change in their kind of software circles. But if you just look at the focus recently, probably in the last 5 years, of how companies and employees operated, in the past, the items that an employee cared about were pensions and work hours and good bosses. We actually think that stuff is dead and broken. We look at today, the millennial generation, Gen Y, even some Gen X like myself, it's really about our purpose, it's about our mission, it's about great colleagues, and it's about people working to really achieve common goals. And it's also about working wherever, whenever, and however possible. I think mobile and other technologies have radically changed that. So we didn't just wake up one morning and have this idea, we want to build this big company, we want to radically change the world as marketing, we want to fundamentally build a place that employees are fanatical about and have this whole experience. We actually started off as a few guys in a room. And this is a real picture from 2006. It's a hotel room. We were at a startup incubator. The incubator caught on fire. So talk about grassroots. We had to relocate to a hotel room and work out of the room. But there was a real conversation that actually happened in this hotel room. And Patrick, who's our third employee, literally went to the two co-founders and he said, hey, I need to take some time off. Someone's in town. I got to pick them up at the airport. How do I apply for time off? And the two co-founders kind of looked at each other and went, I don't know. We're three guys in a room. Why do we care about this? And he's like, well, you got to care. You got to track time off. Every company has a vacation policy, has some way to tell me if I can take time off or not. And both the co-founders looked at each other and said, that seems stupid. You've been working like crazy. You're building this great product. We're on a mission to change how marketing behaves in society at large. Why are we going to ask you to apply for vacation? So they basically set this very light principle and said, there's no vacation policy. Take off when you want. Take as much time as you need. We're going to measure your productivity and measure your performance, but we're not going to maniacally focus on process and controls. And it sounds very simple with three guys in a room, but that was actually the beginning of culture. So when people say culture happens, I believe it started to happen right here. From here, we did get a little bit bigger. Go into 2008, we're back into an incubator. That's actually my bald head up there, and I think I'm installing the Confluence tools at the time, and I'm not kidding, I've got some examples later. And that culture that started to form with the no vacation policy, actually even at small size, started to get tugged on a little bit. And the questions were coming up on, how do I handle this decision? I have a customer in town, can I take them to lunch? And again, back to those founding principles of, does this really help the business? We actually created some very simple guiding principles, not rules, not policies. The first one I think is pretty obvious, a no vacation policy. Now, unfortunately, with the no vacation policy, that got confused with no vacation. Like you're a startup, you're just going to work crazy and go, work yourself to the bone. So we, for the PR people, had to change it to an unlimited vacation policy. So basically, kind of removing all the red tape. We still do that today. Even for people in sales who have sales quotas and have attainment goals, they get quota relief, and they can actually literally carve out part of their sales productivity numbers to make sure that they can hit that. So this principle has survived the test of time. The second one is actually three very simple words. Use good judgment. Now, we've been called to the carpet on this one. We've had people, employees, former employees, people in the press basically say, you can't run a company by saying use good judgment. The world doesn't work that way. And our response to that is, we hire really well. I would not get hired at HubSpot today. So I got hired in the first 10, so I kind of made it below the bar. They're way smarter than me. They're way more sophisticated. But with that, use good judgment is very simple. When you don't know the answer to a question, think to yourself, what's good judgment here? That goes to our expense program, meaning do you need to expense some lunch? Are you taking someone on an interview? Are you taking a customer to dinner? Do you have to fly someone in for an interview? These are employee level decisions. They're not C-level quote unquote decisions. So that's been interesting. The last one's a little bit curt, a little bit terse. It's the no a-hole rule. Okay? 3 people in a room, no big deal. 10 people in a room, no big deal. 100 people in an office. To create a great culture is only going to be as good as every individual in that culture. And a bad employee may not be a bad performer. They could be the top of their game. They could be the top performer. If they're impacting people around them, then they're no good. So we've taken this no a-hole rule, I think, to the extreme, and I'll talk about where we kind of adopted some of these principles from. And we've actually departed ways and said, you can be a star in someone else's sky, not in our sky. And we've helped that person find another job. So my advice here, and as we look at our culture, and again, these culture values forming, is stick to these basic principles or tenets versus kind of rules and policies and procedures. So with that, we're still growing. This is us in 2009, 2010. The incubator that caught on fire kicked us out. We couldn't fit. We were trying to be lazy and not have to commit to space. And then the laws of physics were hitting. If folks have heard of the Dunbar Rule, which is at 150 employees, you don't know everyone in the company anymore, and you start to shake in the frame of the car and all those kind of bad analogies. And that kind of happened to us, right? And we took a step back and we said, we've had these 3 guiding principles. These principles have served us really well. We're very fortunate that we're growing very fast. What are the greats doing? What are the people that we aspire to be doing? So we actually looked at the time, this is 2009, 2010, for the companies that had the most notoriously remarkable employee-centric cultures. And 2 big West Coast firms, obviously, Netflix and Google. I don't know if people are familiar with the Netflix culture deck. It came out in 2009. It was put on SlideShare by Reed Hastings, the founder, Patty McCord, who was one of the early employees, I think, first 10. And one of the key things they had about their culture was 2 things that really rung true for HubSpot. One was it was a performance-based culture, okay? And they basically went to say that they are a team and not a family. And that's pretty harsh if you think about it, right? When you have a family, you're very coddling and nurturing, and you want everyone to succeed. And we kind of have created a generation, I think, around that a little bit. Or you want to be the top of your game and you want to deliver results. And so we borrowed a little bit from Netflix on that performance, and I'm going to touch on how we did that. Google, on the other end of the spectrum, had these legendary employee-centric collaboration, eating together, almost cultish. I think the word cult is in culture, isn't it? And I think that's what we were really learning about kind of how Google was going about this stuff. And then lastly, the great that it's interesting, I think we borrowed more than we admit, is Atlassian themselves. And I think Atlassian today has 5 values. There's some overlap with HubSpot, so we probably borrowed some, and maybe they borrowed some from ours. I don't know yet. But there was a couple key things about Atlassian that was really interesting. One, they had this holiday before you start program. Has anyone heard of the holiday before you start program? Anyone in the room? It's really cool. What it is for new employees, they basically get a weekend away with the significant other of themselves to basically decompress before they start this intense new world. And maybe Atlassian isn't intense, but they're, I think, really good company. So we looked at many of those things, and we also adopted them. So these were who we kind of admired to be. And we actually created our first, little bit corny, but we called it HEART. And basically, these were principles. Humble, meaning we're never good enough, frankly. There's going to always be people that eat us for lunch. Effective, cut the red tape. GSD, get stuff done, or put your expletive in there. Adaptable, change is painful, death is worse. As a startup, if you can't change, you're going to die. So you better be adaptable. Remarkable, be the best at what you do. Be exceptional, be a star, even if it's your only thing that you're good at. And then transparent. I'm going to touch on transparency a ton today and how I think crazy transparent we are, and we push the boundaries of that, and we'll talk about the tools that we do use to do that. So with that, that was actually pretty cool. And we got to the point where it became our civic duty. Literally, we took this little heart thing to the extreme. And basically, everyone in HubSpot, it almost became this cult where everyone was paying attention, everyone was measured. Part of our performance planning was around heart. How good at heart were you? And what I like to say is actually someone in our company took it to such an extreme. It's Dharmesh, our co-founder, who went on this mission, this crazy civic duty mission, to actually create what we now call this culture code. So take those 3 principles from a few people in a room, grow it to 150 people, look at the greats out there of Netflix, Atlassian, Google. There's handfuls of other companies that we really aspired to be. And we actually created this culture code. Now, with the culture code itself, you'll see that little icon I'm going to kind of plagiarize from Dharmesh's deck as we go through some of the tools around it. But the first thing I want to do is define culture. So I've talked a lot about values and principles. For us, it's a set of shared beliefs, values, and practices, okay? It's not actions. It's not tactics. It's not us making rules up. These are literally spiritual, guiding, influential, whatever you want to call it. And I like to look at it as it's our personality, right? So HubSpot, we like to think, is like a quirky dog. We have this quirky personality. And a lot of you guys and girls in the room might be wondering, why do we care so much about it? I've been up here for 10 minutes now, probably blabbing about it. Why do we care so much about it? And for us, a great culture actually attracts great people. First and foremost, I'll be so transparent about it, it's recruiting, right? It's getting the best people in the world to help us solve these problems that we're out to solve. And with great people, given a great culture and a great environment to work in, the sky's the limit. That's literally the bottom line. So Dharmesh took that, and we created, and this is a lot of text. I'm not going to go through everything. Everyone can read very well in the room. But these are really these core principles. And so Atlassian has 5. We weren't trying to double them. We just came up with 10. If we were talking about Spinal Tap, it would go to 11. But with this, I'm going to pick on a few. Metrics, transparency, and autonomy. And the reason why I wanted to pick on those, or touch on those, is these are the ones that we see a real thriving culture around the Atlassian tools. And remember I showed you that picture in 2007, the bald guy in the room installing the Confluence tools. We've actually used these tools, and I'm going to go through a lot of uses of them today to actually drive this culture. So with that, we'll talk about transparency. So transparency at HubSpot is about as extreme as it can be. And the way that we quote it is it has to be both radical and uncomfortable. Okay, now that is interesting because I'm in IT, and the last I checked, I'm responsible for security, I'm responsible for data, I'm responsible, to make sure that we kind of don't shoot ourselves in the foot, but yet we have this culture and this principle that says you will be uncomfortable. And I'm not exaggerating, at least once a week, maybe even once a day, I see something that makes me uncomfortable. And I'm going to go through some pretty funny examples of this. This is from the Culture Code, and this is an unverified claim. It basically says that we have the most interesting wiki on the planet. Okay? Now, unfortunately, Gartner doesn't have a wiki of interest quadrant, so we can't get officially graded in it. But the wiki is Confluence. Okay? And these are real-life examples that I'm going to go through today. I've had to redact some information to protect the innocent on it. But I want to show you how you can use all the collaboration of Confluence with liking and voting and social sharing to drive this. So the examples I'm going to go through is financials. We put our financials. So as a startup, people can take the approach of being very private, very close to the vest, very stealthy. We don't want anyone to know about it. Or we can go all the other way and say, you know what, we're figuring it out as we go. Here's how much money we have in the bank. Here's how much runway we have. Here's our employee count. Here's our revenues. Here's our unit economics. And we go to that side, and I'm going to touch on that. Board meetings. So with no secrets, we literally publish the exact information that we get to our board, our advisors, our friends that drive the company or direct the company. Management meetings. We have this quirky thing at HubSpot where we call it a monthly offsite. We've never left the meeting room. That's the biggest one that we can fit in. We lock ourselves in for 12 hours of bad Chinese food. But all of those discussions get put on Confluence or on our wiki. And that's where the collaboration really happens. Because I said earlier, I couldn't get hired at HubSpot. So if we're out there trying to make decisions and influence the company and our people aren't contributing to that, then we're failing. Strategic topics, pricing and packaging. How many people would put out to your company how you should do your pricing and packaging? Usually that happens kind of in a corner with a CFO and a product person, and they kind of figure out the levers to extract the most value out of the customers. Well, we flip that on our head and basically say, how do we not screw our customer? Right? Solve for the customer is a nice way to word it. And we actually crowdsource through the company through Confluence. And then last is lore and mythology. And this is kind of the history of HubSpot in a very humbling way. And I'll go through some examples there. So let's start off with financial information. Now, I said earlier, use good judgment. Okay? Sometimes you do have to put some bumper rails on use good judgment. And we do it on our financials. Basically, we tell employees, we're giving it to you. Don't give it to other people. And I think what's interesting with that use good judgment and transparency, there's 2 very simple things we say. We will share anything in our company that is legally ours to share, meaning it's not under NDA or a friend-DA with a company or a business, or it's legally ours to share it's not regulated. We're not yet a public company. Maybe one day we'll have that opportunity. But at some point, obviously, lawyers get involved, and we have to be careful with that. So you'll see here, we got some really cool stuff, audited financial statements, and the monthly finance decks. Clearly, we've hardened our wiki, so we've hardened Confluence. It is very secure. We've always been very aware of that, I would say. And I think a lot of people always look at wikis as these collaboration tools and maybe not locked down. We kind of take the opposite approach, where it's like, this is our company strategy, our company data. Next is our board meeting. What I find really cool about this, for folks that know blueprints, you'll see all the mentions here when we're calling out people and giving them credit for actually contributing to that board meeting. The actual PowerPoint decks and keynote decks are attached to it. The topics that were painful I did redact because we make mistakes a lot as a startup, so this all goes out on there. We then get into spotlight meetings. So I was listening over the past couple days, and it was really cool to hear many companies, specifically after the panel yesterday, do some sort of town hall or Q&A or ask the execs or whatever, all hands meetings. We actually use our wiki to seed the questions to those, and there's two flavors of this. One, we basically allow people to do comments, right? Comments can be just general questions. And now I know that the Atlassian company has the questions tool. That might be pretty interesting to start to think about that for upvoting and downvoting. But what we also do is we want to do anonymous questions. So we use PollDaddy, and then we publish the PollDaddy questions anonymously to the wiki or to Confluence so everyone can see them. Now, we rotate every executive every 2 weeks. So my firing drill, I think, is in 2 weeks. And so there's kind of no hiding. Every department, product, engineering, marketing, sales, we all have to get up there and basically get these firing line questions. And I will say no one holds back. It's awesome. It's uncomfortable, like back to our uncomfortable transparency. The other thing that I really love about this is you'll notice in some of the comments is the people like those comments, and that actually upvotes the interest in the question and the amount of time the person answering will actually take to really make sure they cover the details. So in this one case, you can see someone asked one question. I think there was 51 likes on that question, so people knew to pay attention to it and be thoughtful about it. The reason why I redacted it is because we respond to the questions publicly as well. So we still have the face-to-face. This is how we see scaling a company to multi-hundred people and being able to do it with online collaboration. So my next example is pricing and packaging. So I mentioned earlier, we got a little crazy, maybe a little ahead of ourselves, and we asked the company, we're going to start changing our pricing. We built a lot of new products. We're hopefully adding a lot of new value. We're introducing new products. How should we price it? And you'll see here 62 comments, and it was awesome because our sales reps kept us honest. We could have very easily gone off into that dark corner with the product and the CFO and figured out extracting value. And literally, the sales reps called BS on us and said, you're going to kill our customers if you charge it this way. So back to being uncomfortably transparent, we hope that this is kind of walking the walk and talking the talk related to that. This is my favorite and the most painful. So this is basically telling me I'm not doing a good job. This is the if I were so-and-so, this is how I would do their job. Our CEO has been called to this. I have been called to this. Just about any person with any title or history at HubSpot has been called to this. And again, this is all just using the wiki. And the one thing I don't know if people have totally picked up on, this has not been an engineering-driven wiki. I have not yet talked about product. I have yet talked about deadlines or deliveries. And I think so many people focus on the Atlassian tools as a software development collaboration platform. It absolutely is. It's amazing at it. If, and that's a big if you get adoption, which we were fortunate to, everyone in the company should be able to collaborate with it. It would pain me to see this stuff in email or a Google Doc or a shared spreadsheet or some third party. This stuff is in your four walls. It was in our four walls. So this is the if I were Jim O'Neill, this is what I would do. I read it. It took me a couple of days to digest it, and hopefully I reacted accordingly. I'm still here, so I think I did. And then last, for the fun thing of transparency, is our lore and mythology. Literally, first posts on the wiki, customer successes. Like literally, one of our customers called us up when we were 10 people in a room and said, this is effing awesome. Holy crap, I can't believe we're doing this. Never take yourself too seriously, right? Always remember where we started. We are never going to be done. So this is our kind of humble pie. Every time if I have a bad day or that transparency pushes me a little bit to the limit, I will come here and actually laugh for an hour. And we actually modeled this, if you guys remember the cult classic Ferris Bueller's Day Off in the 90s, that cult movie. You know, life moves fast, take a breath and smell the flowers is basically kind of how we started it. So that's cool. It's kind of all these corny things that we've done on transparency. Hopefully you can really see we really, really do it. And honestly, the other thing that maybe you didn't notice on those wiki pages, there was no permission set. Meaning that this wasn't a finance wiki versus a sales wiki versus anything else. It's a company-wide wiki or Confluence implementation. So transparency is cool. also said I wanted to talk about autonomy. Now, autonomy, in our definition, is the ability to be awesome all by yourself. It's kind of aspirational, isn't it? Be awesome. It's like awesome sauce. I'm not that awesome, but we have awesome people. So what autonomy really was for us was basically don't put rules in place, don't put blockers in place, because we're going to move so fast, we're going to make mistakes. It's the incremental world, not just for software, but also for people and for culture. And so with that, this is part of our culture code is we're not going to put up roadblocks just because something broke. Now, if someone keeps breaking it, clearly we need to look at something systemic, okay? So this ties directly into autonomy because people know that they can move fast, they can experiment, and they're not going to be punished by rules and regulations repeatedly unless they do repeatedly things. So how we do that at HubSpot, again, look at this. It's our wiki. We borrowed this from Apple. So you keep hearing me say we borrowed. We beg, borrow, and steal lots of our culture from companies we admire. Apple had this model called the directly responsible individual. It is a person who is not of title, not of history, not of wealth, not of anything, but they're uniquely positioned to deliver a project. And so we kind of shun program managers and project managers. We have them. But we don't want to put them in charge because they're not uniquely positioned to deliver it. So one of my most favorite examples of a DRI is basically we took someone who was in our support group and our services group who worked with customers on a daily basis, and she was killing it. She was just knocking it out of the park. We were moving software from our classic version, which would be a version 1, to our next-gen version, the version 2 of the platform. And we were going to take, at the time, about 9,000 customers and have to migrate 2,000 servers worth of data. It's 2 petabytes of data without downtime. Okay? I was going to screw it up, frankly. I'm an IT guy. I'll just move the data, right? This woman, this girl, had worked with the customers, so we knew that she wouldn't let us screw the customer. And she was a bulldog. She was amazing. So back to autonomy, we took one person who was literally, I would say, a mid-level support / services consultant. We said, you own the project. DFI, don't fuck it up, excuse me. That's what we basically told her, okay? And she nailed it. Now, the wiki was our way to actually coordinate that, okay? And you can see what we do is we actually create DRIs for all these different projects. This is, again, a blueprint in Confluence. We've hacked up the blueprints capability. We built some of our own. And it's really awesome. It's very low touch. I don't hear anymore that I have to create a project plan or I've got to go do a requirements document or all this stuff that I think mar down a lot of companies. And again, maybe we're fortunate because we're still fairly small. But this, again, is all on Confluence, so we think it's pretty cool. Part of being autonomous is also having the ability to just effing do it. Okay? I said earlier, no rules, no regulations. If you look at our wiki, search for JFDI, it's all over the place. It's employees telling other employees, just do it. Stop talking about it. Stop meeting about it. Take action. I talked about our Civic Duty. We really try to drive that through the whole company. If you look quickly, one's from our president and COO. One is friendly advice to another HubSpotter as we got bigger. Basically, a HubSpotter got on the wiki on Confluence and said, you know what, here's what I learned in the first 90 days. I'm going to tell all new HubSpotters, here's the things that they should think about. And one of them was JFDI, just do it. So I hope that that means that while we can't force culture, we can nourish it and make it part of our daily lives and use these tools to do it. So we're going to wrap up on autonomy, and we're going to hop into metrics. So all the stuff I've talked about so far is fluffy, right? You got transparency, you got data, you've got autonomy. How do we know we're doing a good job? Okay, I just mentioned we've got 10,000 customers. We actually have some good revenues coming in. We are data pornographists. We look at data so hard, it's not even funny. And like I have to run all the data, and it's like it makes my head spin. We have very sophisticated BI platforms. We've got quote-unquote big data. We've got quote-unquote Excel as an application. But what I'm going to do now is tie how you take that data, turn it into metrics, and collaborate on those metrics such that it's transparent and autonomous, right? So we feed all of these little principles all off each other. So I'm going to start off with Jira. So far, everything we've talked about has been the wiki, or Confluence. And in this case, this is a good example of some data porn. This is our reliability of our product. So I'm going to be very transparent as a late stage, fast-growing startup that likes to move very fast. We ship code to production between 50 and 100 times a day for these 10,000 customers across 2,000 servers, 2 petabytes of data, 3,000 cores, yada, yada, yada. I'm an IT guy. How do we know we're doing a good job? Well, we have to measure it. And measuring that is very, very interesting. At the end of the day, it has to make sense for our employees. It can't be something that I control and then I put out, oh, we had 99.82% uptime, because that's BS. So we use Jira, and in this case, you'll see a dashboard. The far left is the number of incidents per month. I'm going to talk about what these incidents mean and all the workflows that we've built around them. Top right-hand corner, I think, is the most fascinating one. It's the impact to customers. There's many times where we make a mistake, we move too fast, we have a service provider issue, but we have enough resiliency where the customers don't feel the impact. That is ideal. There's many times where all those things I said does have a customer impact. That is less than ideal. And this is how we hold ourselves accountable. So from Jira, we start off, hopefully there's many Jira users in the room, with a very simple workflow, a very simple project, and an issue type called critical situation. Sounds bad. It usually is. It's critical. And the thing that I love about this, and I'll be honest, it took us about 2 weeks, I think, of coding, configuring, iterating, tweaking, throwing away, cutting, blowtorching, all that kind of fun stuff, is back to the autonomy and transparency. Anyone in the company, anyone can submit a critical situation. And the use case that I love, we have an overnight support team. Not all of us like to stay up all night anymore. We used to when we started the company. 3 in the morning, someone in London, someone around the world, I think 56 countries we have customers now, will have an issue. Well, that support person has a limited ability. They know a ton, they're very smart, but they have a limited ability to actually fix it. So all they do is they go into Jira, they start a critical situation, and they identify the severity. Level P1, the world's about to end, the zombies are taking over, we're in trouble. A P2, part of an application isn't behaving properly, it probably impacts multiple customers. Level 3, the fire's burning, it's under the ground, no one knows it's happening, you guys have about 15 minutes before everything goes to hell in a basket. And so Jira basically kicks that off. And what you're going to see is this is the magic. And I was super excited to hear about the keynote when they're talking about all the new Jira and Confluence integration, because we took the API, bubblegum, duct tape, and super glue, and kind of mashed all these things together. So with that one autonomous HubSpotter, filling out a simple Jira ticket, setting a severity, the world of HubSpot and our customers are going to get notified that something is wrong. In this case, you can see HipChat. You can see hopefully where I highlighted in HipChat that there is a critical situation. That's like an APB system in the police world. It sends it to our technical operations room. It sends it to our dev team room. It sends it to our support room. If it's an item that could impact sales, we drink our own champagne or eat our own dog food, so we're testing and selling the product that we're potentially having issues with. Our sales folks will find out about it. And so this is back to transparency. There's no hiding. We are having an issue. All hands on deck. We are going to finish it or fix it. What I think is as cool is an email from Jira comes out instantaneously, and it goes to an opt-in list of HubSpotters so they can actually know that there's something up. Maybe it doesn't impact them, but it's sure nice to know. It's a really lousy day when something's wrong in your work environment and you don't know there's something, so we err on the side of over-communicating. And that's had its own funs and challenges. If it's a really bad situation, in full transparency, in this one, we shipped bad code to production. It goes to a third-party website hosted outside of all of HubSpot's ecosystem that is trust.hubspot.com. We followed the greats of Salesforce and Google and Amazon and all them. And it tells customer we have an issue. Now, if anyone uses those 3 vendors I talked about, Google, Salesforce, and Amazon, I would like to say it's painful. When they have an issue, they tend to take 15 to 20 minutes to say there's an issue. At best, you'll find out what the issue is in another 30 minutes. And at best, you'll find out it's fixed 30 minutes later. Okay? I don't know if this will scale. We are on the over-communication, and I actually get dinged for it a lot in the sales cycle because people are like, you're down all the time. And I'm like, we're really not down all the time. We just communicate a lot. And here's how we measure it, and I'm going to get back to that measurement. So this literally went to a third-party website that's got a real-time update and says that. Again, this was from 3 clicks inside of Jira from a support rep. It's awesome. Love it. I didn't build it, by the way. That's why I can say it's awesome. So we fixed the issue. Okay, what you'll see is that someone in the HipChat room, a dev team member, basically said, oh, I did a boo-boo. I pushed bad code. I'm reverting the code. Okay? There, you see within minutes, the person responsible, the DRI for reliability, basically pushes out the mea culpa. We screwed up. Here's what we're doing to fix it. Now, that's just talk, okay? I didn't measure action yet. Let's come back to Jira. Everything I talked about, the service interruption was 16 minutes, okay? So regardless of the time it took us to find the issue, to report the issue, to close the issue, and to communicate the issue, we measure with software that it was a 16-minute customer impact, and that's very important to us. Now, all the other data that I talked about, you'll see here, this is all just standard Jira fields, right? It's just that we've kind of pulled them out so that we could measure it. And then what I think is even cooler is action, subtasks on how to prevent that issue from happening again. Now, we don't necessarily use the entire Jira Atlassian build rigging. We use GitHub Enterprise and tie it in ourselves, so it's just a different build ecosystem. But again, the only thing an employee has done was pulled the fire alarm, entered in some code or some text, an engineer got involved, reverted some code, and everything else just happened, okay? We had transparency, we had autonomy, and voila, metrics. This all rolls up back to a very public wiki page in the company, and this is how many of us compensation plans work, frankly, is how well did we deliver reliability. Now, this is a little bit of an eye candy chart because you see it, we measure by application, by customer impact, and that gets back to that Jira data, right? That really cool Jira data that we pulled out. Because it's such eye candy, we do take a law of averages and we roll it up into an average reliability. This is not uptime. If this was our uptime, I would not be working at HubSpot anymore. This is basically how we rank and force rank all these different levels of severities. And then full transparency, we tell people how we calculate it. And this gets very interesting when we have contract discussions with some larger enterprise software companies where they're like, oh, we want an uptime number. And because we're dealing with this large SaaS, highly distributed, decoupled system, we have to be very careful to say, like, what is downtime? It's not the entire system being down. It could just be a small facet of that system being down. So this is kind of our way to do that. I touched on it. It took us about 2 weeks of figuring out how to do this. So no secrets. It wasn't a tremendous amount of work. I honestly think with all the cool stuff that Atlassian I just saw yesterday, I can't wait to really see it. May undo a lot of this work, but for 2 weeks, I'm totally happy with what we got. So with that, I said I would do 3 things. I actually lied. I'm going to do a 4th. I can't stop talking. We are a perpetual work in progress. So it's cool that we've got metrics. Hopefully it's fun that we have transparency. Hopefully it's empowering that we have autonomy. I talked a lot about making mistakes. This is like the most core thing to our culture at HubSpot is move fast. We borrowed it from Facebook, right? Everyone's legendary with Zuckerberg and how fast they move. It's amazing even at their scale. But how we look at that, and this is from our culture deck as well, is we're never done iterating, learning, and rethinking. It's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be good enough. And all those things that I hopefully showed you earlier just kind of influence this thinking. Go back to our infamous wiki that I keep saying is the most interesting on the planet. Just look for the word experiment, and you will see all these experiments that we do that, again, Confluence, not as a software development-focused tool, but as a collaboration tool across all of our HubSpot ecosystem. And you can see another blueprint here, right? So you can see who's owning these experiments. And we actually have a pretty lightweight framework to do it. We celebrate failures as much as we celebrate successes. As you get bigger, that gets harder. People tend to want to, I hate to say blame things, but they're like, oh, we should have done that stupid experiment. We absolutely should have done that stupid experiment because if we didn't try it, we wouldn't know, and otherwise we're going to get stuck like every other company. So I don't know how far we'll be able to do that, but we are pushing as fast as we can. So with all that and being a work in progress, transparent, autonomous, and all that kind of fun stuff, and being a work in progress, this is to be continued. I don't know when we're going to end. We're never done. So thank you. I think we have 5 minutes for questions. I also set up there's an email alias there, Atlassian culture at HubSpot.com. I read it. Another gentleman will read it. If there's any questions that you want to send afterwards, part of HubSpot's mission in being hopefully a fun company to work at is to share. So all these mistakes that we've made, and again, we make mistakes every single day, we're happy to share with people so they can decide if they want to make the same mistake or choose a different path or whatever else. So please email me. Yeah. So it's a great question. We measure that. So we are a SaaS company, subscriptions, paid monthly and paid quarterly, annually. We have customers vote with their wallet, and we do NPS, so Net Promoter Score, and we do eNPS, which is Employee Net Promoter Score. And we maniacally focus on every response. We categorize it. We look for, we do text analysis, downtime, unreliable, unstable, bug, screw up, lazy, like literally we've got these word clouds. And that drives, and I'll tell you, we did a code red, I want to say it was 6 months ago, where the feedback from our customer base was, you're moving too fast. Your product is great, it's getting bigger, it's not getting better. So on our wiki, our VP of product, David Cancel, basically, literally his wiki title was pulling the and-on code red. And literally said, from day one, for the next 30 days, we're not going to do anything but focus on reliability. Now, again, that's part of our culture. A lot of companies wouldn't have the ability for one person, even though he's a senior person in the company, to be able to do that. But so we measure the data. We use our guts when we think we're screwing the customer, and we were screwing the customer at that point in time. So, hey.
How do you marry things like code standards and quality with autonomy?
Yeah. It's an awesome, awesome question. So that gets into religious debates with code quality. Yeah. So the question is how do we marry autonomy with code quality and standards? And I said that gets into the religious debate, right? There's a bunch of tools that we use to make sure that code does follow the classic tab versus space versus how many spaces. We allow people to choose their own IDEs. But through all of the dev process, we use Git or GitHub internally. It comes to a pull request, and we're very flexible, I think, on the way they solve the problem, but we're pretty maniacal that, and I don't want to sound hypocritical, that it matches code standards, because other people can't read the code then. So that's probably a trade-off that we did about 2 years ago.
Oh, we have a question.
Chris Macharia, FIS. You talked a bit about how you informally project plan using Confluence.
Yeah.
Just touch a bit more on what that looks like.
Yeah, so basically we use blueprints. We will create a product roadmap. Roadmap is a dirty word inside of HubSpot because that implies dates. I think a lot of companies always associate certain deliveries. So we actually focus on features versus dates. It's agile. What we'll do from there is basically we have the wiki page that, for instance, the pricing and packaging in IT, we had a whole bunch of finance systems to go change, and we treat it as an engineering project. Wiki page for the whole company to see, linked to Jira tasks that the whole company can see. They can follow the progress. We do a weekly wiki update, or weekly page amended to that kind of master page with the general status of the project, all tying to a Jira dashboard that actually shows % complete and all those kind of things. Back to, I'm psyched that Atlassian has started to tie those two products formally together because we use the RESTful APIs and did a bunch of glue work to do it. So.
We have time for one more.
Any other questions?
Has a question?
Yeah, awesome question. So the question was, how do we prevent sales engineers or supports from inputting P1s because it's their highest priority? We learned the hard way, and we did some public shaming, to be honest. And again, it was all internal. I was even guilty of it at some point, because when you do move fast, at some point you cry uncle. And there was back to the question of, when we did have to cry uncle. We did education. So basically what we did is we have a wiki page that literally ties to when you're filling out that crit set, there was a URL, a link to the wiki page. And it says, in these conditions, P1. In these conditions, P2. Now, use good judgment. If someone really wants to say, you know what, I think this is really upsetting this class of customers, they can do it. They just better be ready that the social culture of HubSpot will react very vocally on the wiki. And you have to be careful. There's paper tigers, right? That's the other thing that I think people need to be careful of using electronic collaboration tools. We also have an ongoing thing where a lot of us, me included, watch for paper tigers, and we go talk to that person within minutes. I stalk the wiki. I read it, I'm not exaggerating, 50 times a day. Our executive team, our employees. Sales is a little different because they're on sales calls a lot, so we tend to see them morning and night. But it's back to it takes a village to raise a child. Everyone's responsible. It's our civic duty to do it. So, is that good?
Yeah.
Okay, please send questions.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Thanks.
We're going to break.